It's summer, it's midday. I'm under a Australian tree, beautiful red blossoms in spring. The bees and the birds love it. It's a little bit like our auntie. You know, auntie is on life support. Not your auntie or my auntie, but our auntie. Now, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, which is theoretically owned by the people of this country, was called at one stage in the 80s and 90s Aunty. Because, you know, like your favourite auntie, it was both cheeky and knowledgeable and forgiving and a lot of fun to be with. So the Australian Broadcasting Corporation colloquially was known as Aunty. And since the mid-1920s, Auntie's been providing commentary, both on radio, television and now on social media. Never in the written media, never in newspapers, although it produces some magazines for some specialist programs. Now, Auntie is on life support. Now, I've been involved in campaigns to protect the independence of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation since 1990. I'm going to give you a little story to show how it works. In the late 1990s, mid-1990s, late 1990s, during the height of the Howard regime, during the core and non-core promise time, during when the push back the boats, refugee asylum seeker ideology was implemented, John Howard was the darling as Prime Minister of the media. Now, for some reason, somebody in the Australian Broadcasting Corporation who hosted an overnight program for the last decade, during the 1990s or late 1980s, an Australia-wide program in the early hours of the morning, invited me to provide a radical anarchist perspective of the news of the day. I'd go in once a week, we'd spend about a half an hour discussing current events. And after 3 months, there was a knock on the door, not my door, the person who ran the program, you know, their program on their door, and they said, well, you need a bit of balance. Because basically I'd been taking the mickey out of the Howard government and their policies. So Senator Julian McGorran, who was a National Party senator, came on every week and we had a discussion. And it was obvious after a few weeks that I was destroying most of his arguments and continued to take the mickey out of the Howard government and its policies. 2 months later, the program was taken off air. The person who'd hosted the program for over a decade was put into the back rooms because she was a permanent employee. She wasn't on short-term contracts like most people these days. She was a permanent employee and she was placed in a backroom job, and she was in that backroom job for at least 20 years before she got a gig back on a, you know, innocuous program. So that's the way the ABC worked in the 1990s. But the difference was the Australian people were very interested in independence. We had organisations like Friends of the ABC and organisations which we set up as a result of our removal from the ABC radio, Friends of Our ABC, and accidentally I got elected to the board of Friends of the ABC, which caused a bit of consternation, because what they had done is they actually hadn't filled all the nominations. There was one left and I nominated and was automatically elected. And over the next 3 years there was titanic struggle in that organisation, although we did force them to do one major demonstration in the city of Melbourne, which drew over 4,000 people, to protect the independence of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Now, it's gone downhill since. And it's gone downhill for a variety of reasons. Not that the ABC was perfect. in the 1990s. But what it did, it provided a wide range of viewpoints as far as political analysis was concerned. Public intellectuals, many with university connections who had tenure, provided analysis. Today, that analysis is provided by people from the private sector. How many times when you switch on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation television or radio do you actually have commentators from the private sector, from News Limited, from the corporate-owned media, giving commentary? So things have changed, and Aunty has got sicker and sicker. And as she becomes more and more demented, the ideas that she is able to express have a similarity about them. And over the last 20 years we've seen a deterioration, not in terms of the range of programs, mainly lifestyle programs, the formation of the National Indigenous Television Association, NITV, the Cooking Channel, SBS. But as far as the Australian Broadcasting Corporation is concerned and its radio networks around the country, what we've seen is a deterioration in terms of the breadth and scope of opinion which appears on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. This was done by a variety of ways. One, successive Liberal National Party governments selected people for the ABC board whose position was to abolish the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. But their dilemma was, although they had a majority on the board, the members of the ABC continued to be heavily unionised. And they had tenure, T-E-N-U-R-E. So what the ABC has done, ABC management over the last few decades, is introduced short-term contracts for its major presenters. It has neglected to provide us a wide range of viewpoints to the people of this country. It's the same viewpoints, especially when it comes to government, economic policy, so-called democracy. It may continue to have an important role in terms of identity politics and does provide some, but limited, analysis as far as political concerns, as far as political opinion is concerned. This has occurred, as I said before, for a number of reasons, but the major reason is the lack of long-term employment by ABC staff. All ABC staff are on short-term contracts, some less than a year. And whether they're appointed or reappointed basically depends on whether they've rocked the boat or not. Because most of the ABC content is highly scripted. It's not just about the hosts who have minimal editorial control. It's about those people in the shadows who have been appointed mainly with authoritarian viewpoints, with viewpoints which support the status quo, who've been appointed whose major role is to ensure the editorial contract of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation continues to be something which reflects what they describe as the opinions of the country. Its charter, we're told its charter, is about being even-handed. So what that means is during an electoral campaign that the amount of time which is given to different political viewpoints depends on the number of parliamentary representatives. So if there's a new political party or independents, the amount of coverage they receive is minuscule, if not minimal. The Charter is not about providing a wide range of viewpoints. The Charter is to decreases the number of viewpoints which are able to be aired both on radio and television on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Another way the Australian Broadcasting Corporation has been gelded is through a lack of resources. So we're finding fewer people having to do more with less, as social media relies on investment. So what we see is the same viewpoints appearing constantly. And if other viewpoints appear, they appear for a very short period of time and then disappear. And if they don't follow the status quo, as we've seen with this journalist on ABC Radio in Sydney, short-term contracts are terminated. So the ABC has been under extreme pressure. Aunty has been under extreme pressure. And as any human being is under extreme pressure, what happens eventually is that human being gets sick. And Aunty has become exceptionally sick. Lack of finances, short-term contracts, pressure from the outside on a board which continues to acquiesce to outside pressures. Not pressures from public intellectuals, because they don't exist these days, but pressures from specific organisations like the Institute of Public Affairs, or I call it the Institute of Private Affairs, who complain vociferously about everything which appears on the ABC. And the ABC folds. Not the hosts, who have minimal editorial control, but management folds consistently because of lack of support from the board. Nothing highlights this more than what happened to Stan Grant. Now, Stan Grant has a First Nations background. He's a multi-awarded journalist with over 30 years' experience, both in the private sector as well as the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. And he was hounded out of his position on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation by outside elements who were unhappy with his viewpoints regarding First Nations people and some other things. He had to go to the police station himself to lodge a complaint when his family was threatened. He had no support from ABC management, no support, public support from the ABC board, no support from the director, Ida Buttrose. He was left to rot. No wonder, because of the increasing pressure and the lack of support from ABC management and the board and the managing director, that Stan Grant has now left the ABC. No protection is provided by the Australian Broadcasting Corporation board and management to hosts who dare to raise issues which are considered to be beyond the pale by this country's rulers, by those who exercise power, especially when it comes to inequality. It's one thing to highlight inequalities, another thing to talk about mechanisms via which those who own the means of production, distribution, exchange and communication and their parliamentary puppets can be made to pay. So Aunty is on life support. She is on life support for a variety of reasons. The final nail in the coffin may be the appointment of a new managing director to replace Ida Buttrose. The current managing director experience was in the private sector. The new managing director's experience is basically in the private sector. He was the CEO of News Limited, which is Murdoch's. That's, Murdoch's stable of newspapers, television stations, Foxtel, all these organisations. And he has now been appointed a managing director by the Albanese government, who claim there was an independent mechanism via which the new managing director was appointed, and he's a great appointment. Isn't there anybody outside the private sector, maybe a public intellectual, who could have been appointed in his place? This is the last straw. For the last quarter of a century, the ABC has been under sustained attack from conservative and reactionary elements in society. The ABC boards, successive boards, have been missing in action, and they have actually been, blowing the trumpet for those authoritarian, repressive elements in our society. The ABC is a shadow of its former self. I'll give you an example. I was a bit bored a few days ago and I turned on radio. I went to 621, that's Radio National, and there was an American program. I'm sure it was a good program. Then I switched, I thought I'll switch to the news channel, 1026. These are national channels. It was broadcasting the BBC. Where's the Australian content? There's minimal Australian content. Fine, they may have some, nice, in inverted commas, lifestyle programs and some nice cooking programs, most of them from overseas. But the fact is, when it comes to providing independent, Australian-focused analysis, it's not there. When it comes to providing independent political analysis, it's not there. When it comes to providing alternatives to the status quo, it is not there. The ABC is a shadow of its former self. It's a shadow of the organisation it was in the 1970s and the 1980s. Aunty is on life support. There are many people in our society that want to turn off the ventilator, that want to privatise the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, because the private-owned media, the corporate-owned media, is unhappy with the competition that the ABC provides, and they have bankrolled and continue to bankroll campaigns which are designed to privatise what's left of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. So think about it. Next time you turn on the ABC, whether it's television, radio or social media, you access social media, look at what's happening. And maybe, instead of complaining to the board or through the complaints process, maybe it's about time that you took your complaints directly to the government of the day, directly to the minister. Because the more people that complain because of the poverty of the current ABC and its inability to protect its staff, the greater the chance that something will occur. Stop working up the right channels. Forget about the official complaint mechanisms. Go straight to the minister, go straight to the Prime Minister, go straight to your local Member of Parliament. An independent ABC, independent of the corporate-owned media, is essential in this country. We pay for the ABC, you pay for it, I pay for it. Whether it's for income tax, whether it's through GST, whether it's excise duties, we pay over $1 billion for it. Why should we have a clone of the private sector providing information to the people of Australia when we could have a vibrant ABC? I can see Aunty starting to wriggle and wants that endotracheal tube removed. She's sick and tired of being told what to do.